Hello and welcome to 21st Century Vitalism. This is a podcast exploring how we can best maintain a sense of energy, inspiration, and wakefulness while living with the unique stressors of the modern age. My name is Brett Kane, and I'll be your host on this journey as we talk with a wide range of spiritual practitioners, somatic therapists, artists, environmentalists, pretty much anyone that I feel holds a piece to this puzzle of being fully alive in the 21st century. Joining us on the show today is architect, feng shui practitioner, author, and dharma arts teacher, Anjie Cho. If you're a longtime listener, you may remember Anjie from a couple of years ago as the guest who helped me kick off my first rebrand. In that conversation, we talked about feng shui more broadly, with its history and how Anjie came to the practice herself. In this conversation, we're getting more granular with the practice so that you can begin to utilize some of these teachings to begin your own explorations. To do this, we discuss the concepts of qi and how to increase our sensitivity to it. We also explore the 5 elements of traditional Chinese medicine, the mindfulness component of feng shui, and how to use a tool called the bagua so we can gain insight into our internal processes from the external world. If this kind of work resonates with you, I highly recommend checking out Anjie's newest book, Mindful Living, A Guide to the Everyday Magic of Feng Shui, which she co-authored with Laura Morris. She also has 2 other books available, which, when combined, create a very thorough ground to really jumpstart your feng shui practice. If you want to support this show, you can head on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism and consider becoming a patron. Any and all help is appreciated, and I see you, and I am giving you all of the heart energy that I can muster. If money is not the way you'd like to help, I totally get it. That's okay. You can also subscribe on YouTube. That's probably the most direct way to help grow this channel. You can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook. Really, anything that you'd be willing to offer is a huge help to grow this very small but growing platform. So without further ado, please sit back, drink some tea, do some stretches. Most importantly, open your heart for Anjie Cho. Hey, Anjie. Hello. Hi. Welcome back to the show. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for joining me. It's been a couple years, huh? How are things going for you?
Hi, Brett. Thank you so much for having me back. I think a lot of things have changed since we last talked. The world is in a different place, maybe also a precarious place, but in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have probably changed a lot too. So I'm really excited to catch up with you.
Yeah, I was really glad when we made that connection because you were actually somebody I had in mind. I was like, I feel like we're going to have to revisit some of that. It just felt like it was in my field coming up. So it really felt very serendipitous, us coming together and getting to spend a lot of time with your work since then has just been such a treat. As I was telling you before this, I have made it through one of your new books and then halfway through one of your older books. And so I'm just like very steeped in this material, and it has just been like a really great thing to have in the change of seasons, just being able to relate to spaces just a little bit differently and just to be a little bit more attuned to the subtle fluctuations of my feelings. So I just want to start by saying like, congratulations on your new book. It really is just so clear and so pertinent to today.
Yeah, so I think since we've last talked, I've written 2 books, and one I think that Mindful Homes will be really interesting for you to read because I really tied it into my Buddhist practice, the practice of feng shui, and mindful living is much more of a guide for beginners, but also longtime practitioners will also appreciate it, but there's less of a focus on the Buddhist connection, but more about how to really just practically apply feng shui. So it's more accessible for a lot of people. Like a lot of the things that we talk about in mindful living cover topics that Laura and I talk about in our podcast, but most of our free content and the things that we offer just to all of our followers is all compiled in this book in a really cohesive logical and digestible format.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really think you did a good job in making it clear because it's something that could seem very abstract or very kind of amorphous. And I felt like as I walked away from this book, um, understanding it a lot more, especially things like the Bagua and stuff that I was kind of like, I don't really think I get this. But without getting ahead of ourselves, I can acknowledge that I'm sure some of my listeners today were not with me 3 years ago when we last talked. So I think to just bring everybody up to speed and get us all kind of in the same playing field, I wanted to just ask you very plainly, what exactly is feng shui? And also, as an addition to that, in the title of your book, you mention an everyday magic. And I guess I'm curious, on top of that, what is the nature of this magic that you are referring to?
Well, the first question, what is feng shui? So there's the generic kind of answer that most people say is it's a practice that comes from Asia, and it looks at your environment and how chi or life force energy moves through and enhances and supports you in your environment. So chi is like similar to prana or ki, um, and it's the way it's the life breath in a way, not your breath, not your blood, but just that life force. And we examine how it moves through your home and how it's cultivated in your home. So it could also affect the arrangement of furniture, can affect the colors, the placement of things, but also your relationship to your environment. So then, as a Buddhist practitioner and a longtime teacher of feng shui and practitioner of feng shui, my personal definition of feng shui is that it's a mindfulness practice. It's about paying attention to the details of your environment and to begin to see how you are interconnected and interdependent with your spaces, that you're not separate. And so you can begin to see on a very superficial level that, oh, maybe my bedroom does affect me because it's where I sleep and spend so much time and I rest and rejuvenate there. But similarly, how does my space affect me? How do I affect it? How does my home affect me? How do I affect it? How do my neighbors affect me? How do I connect with the outside world? And how does my exterior environment, how does it directly relate, and how is it interdependent and interrelated to my internal space?
Yeah.
And then I forgot the second question.
Yeah, no, just
Oh, I
the nature of
remember.
magic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Okay.
the everyday magic that comes from an exploration that you just kind of described.
All right. So Laura and I, we actually have this joke with our students because we teach a feng shui certification program, and that's the bulk of what we sell. So we teach a lot online and offer a lot of free online content, and these books really support the general public because it's a really accessible teaching or way to learn about feng shui. And we joke that the school that we teach is like, you don't know, but you're entering Hogwarts. So,
Yeah.
so in many ways, it is a magic practice that you begin to start to learn how you can harness the chi or the energy around you, the life force energy around you to one, benefit you. How can you cultivate it to support you? And two, also, how can you examine it, recognize it's present, and again, like that interconnected and interdependence factor, how we're not disconnected from nature and the world around us. And then the other aspect of this everyday magic is that we really want to emphasize for our followers and for our readers that feng shui is really accessible. It's an everyday magic. It's accessible to everyone. So you don't need special psychic abilities, or you don't need to have you don't need to be a designer. You don't need to be psychic. You don't need to be super intuitive, because actually everyone is intuitive. Everyone has these skills. Just like from the Buddhist perspective, we all have Buddha nature, we all have bodhicitta. Like, this is something that we've all been gifted, and there may be conditioning that covers our intuition up. There may be conditioning that, or situations that prevent us from seeing our environment or seeing things as they are, or maybe there's so much debris that's accumulated on our windows that we can't see the outside world or see our spaces around us. But it's something that we all have within our own hearts. It's within our own our inheritance as human beings. So that's really where this everyday magic comes from. So it is a magical practice. It's esoteric. It's beyond what you can see, but also includes what you can see. So it's tangible and intangible. It's heaven and earth, and it's accessible to everyone. So we don't want people to think that they're not good enough, they're not creative enough, they're not intuitive enough to be able to work with the teachings that Feng Shui has to offer.
Yeah. So, the notion of qi is something that I think is really been appropriated by Western culture. And we actually talked a couple of years ago about how like karma was. That was like one of the things we kind of explored. But I noticed like qi is also one of those things that everybody says in pop culture and they make jokes about it. But I guess could you just go into a little bit more about kind of like what like an optimized chi flow is, and maybe like how it gets obstructed and how we can become more sensitive to this kind of force in our life to where it's not just some abstraction, but something that we can learn to ride and communicate with.
Mm-hmm. You know what's actually really interesting, Brett? Maybe because I'm in such a bubble, I didn't realize like that it's kind of misappropriated sometimes.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I feel like I've heard it in pop culture, like media, just kind of like, oh yeah, like use your chi to do this. And it's just like talked about in a way whenever it does come up, it just seems really flippant and just kind of goofy, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. People really pick up on it. I think it's an
Yeah.
easy word. It's an easy word to kind of start
Yeah.
to repeat.
Yeah.
I have heard it in my yoga classes a little bit. So, okay, so it's a great question because also I often have to define chi for a lot of people, and I always make sure to do it because I don't want to speak in ways that people don't understand and use jargon so much. So I always say chi parentheses life force energy,
Yeah.
and that's a quick answer, right? Life force energy. But like what? So you talked about like what is the importance of looking at the chi? So chi, from a feng shui perspective, is very similar to how chi may be looked at from a martial arts practitioner or an acupuncturist or a Chinese medicine practitioner. And it's also, again, similar to like prana for a yoga practitioner, a body with body work. So chi is that life force energy. And there's actually a Chinese medicine book, and I can't remember. Well, I'm going to quote a book, but I can't remember what book it is. So right off the top of my head, but it talks about how, how chi is like the sparkle in someone's eye.
Oh, I love that.
So when someone is alive, there's that sparkle in their eye. And then when there's no life left, when the chi has left the body, the eyes are flat and there's no more sparkle in that eye. And so it's that life force energy. And so in feng shui, we look at the chi for everything. Like I always teach my students, follow the chi. Where is the chi coming from? So we're curious about looking at where does the chi come into a space. For instance, like how does chi enter a space? How does life force energy come in? And that's generally through the doorways, right? Because that's where also people move in through doorways. Everything comes in. Your furniture comes in through the doorway, right?
Yeah.
So also we talked about windows. So sunlight can come through. So chi can also come through windows, and then chi can also move through walls through as well, but it's much slower because it's more dense. So we look at how does chi move through a space? How is it cultivated? How does it flow? Are you stuck? For instance, when you walk into a front door, is there a wall right in front of you? Are you stopped? Or another example is, do you walk into your bedroom and immediately hit your shin on a piece of furniture? Or do you have so many things behind your door that you have to turn sideways to come in, right? Or you have to step over things. So that's impeding your flow, the way that you can physically move through the space, but also how your life force energy, how your chi moves through a space. So we want to see if there's some blocks. We want to see if things are stuck. We want to see if things are stagnant. And for instance, there's lots of physical things in our environment that give us clues, like where does dust accumulate? So a place that's not a part of your home, like maybe the top of a bookshelf, a lot of dust can accumulate there because there's not a lot of chi flow there. And we would call that, in the English language, we would say that's a dead corner, right?
Yeah.
So we already kind of have this in our language that there's no life energy there. So another example would be if you could visualize a cafe, right? And there's two tables. One, there's nothing on the table. Two, there's like a hat on the table and like and a little cup of coffee, but no people. But even that hat and that cup of coffee points to more chi, more life force energy. So that's more yang. And then the empty table would be more yin. And so we just kind of look at the qualities of the chi, but really, I guess in the most basic way, we see, is the chi flowing? Because when the chi doesn't flow anymore is when there's no more life. So, and chi flows through everything. It can flow there's chi that animates your bed. There's chi that animates your walls. Chi gets programmed into your walls, just like the vibrations of the energy get of all the people and all the beings that have been in your space or on your land. They're all imprinted in our spaces.
Yeah. Wow. So in this hyperbolic situation I'm going to create, if there's a house that is just so obstructed, like chi just cannot move through, or a body that's very unhealthy that hasn't done anything to really bring attention to that, I guess, like, what are some of the symptoms that might arise from dysfunctional flow?
Yeah, so sometimes it may be a very direct correlation, like, so in our bodies when the chi doesn't flow, or in our homes when the chi doesn't flow, then we feel stuck in our lives, like we feel like things aren't moving forward. So it can mean something very obvious, like if you have chi blocking your door, you literally maybe can't get out. So then that may mean that you don't go out and you don't connect with the outside world, and then that eventually affects your health, and it does affects your health, your overall well-being, your mood, your happiness, and how well you can do in the world. So so it can really greatly affect all aspects of your life. And that said, though, sometimes people get very worried, like, does my home have bad feng shui? I always want to highlight the fact that sometimes we can also become attracted or set ourselves up in situations that may present challenging feng shui or may present challenging chi. Like, for instance, if someone gets very sick, I'm not saying that they invited that, but our bodies are wise, our homes are wise. Our home is is like our body, actually. In feng shui, we view the home as your body. And sometimes difficulty and illness do arise, or challenging feng shui arises, because it may exacerbate a situation that we need to address. So, challenges come up in our lives when we're ready to handle them. So sometimes we move into a place where we literally hit a wall every day, because then we start to see, wait, how are we hitting a wall in our lives every day? And maybe it exacerbates that situation so that we actually start to make movement to transform that difficulty in our life.
Yeah, amazing. I've thought about this a lot in terms of like prana and chi, and I've used this phrase in my own explorations of like attentional energy, in terms of just like what we are placing our attention on and allowing like our perceptions to like rest, like in terms of the external world, the idea of like dusting a corner that doesn't have any attention to it. When you bring your attention to it and then you allow your body to interact with it by dusting it, you're allowing it into your awareness, and you're kind of expanding your awareness into the spaces that you're existing in. And, in something like Tai Chi, it's very precise, and you like really need your attention on every like micro movement in order to do the graceful flowing movement. So there's like, to me, it seems like attention and chi, there's something about those that seem really synonymous. I don't know if that's relevant at all.
Yeah, I agree with you because, for instance, when you place attention on something, you actually are infusing it with more chi. So when there is no chi, or let's say, if we use life force energy, if you don't give any attention or life force energy to, say, yeah, that corner of your, or maybe, okay, here's a better example. The room that you like, some room, maybe you have a drawer that you never go into, that
The
you have
junk
like
drawer, the
the junk
Midwest
drawer.
junk drawer. Yeah.
Yeah, the junk drawer. Okay, so you ignore it. You only put more junk in there. You never clean it out. So you are giving some attention to it, right? Because you have in your mind, there's a junk drawer that I'm going to purposely ignore. So you are placing some attention to it. So it's actually still kind of depleting your chi, your energy a little bit. But so you could also take that energy that it's already taking away from you, or see that you're already giving it unintentionally, and intentionally give it some energy to make some change. Or you could continue. There's nothing wrong with continuing to ignore it. Maybe it's not the most important thing to you, but yes, absolutely, giving attention to something is a way of offering whatever that is, more chi, whether it's a person, an object, dust. It could be a non-object, right? It could be a space, negative space. So all of that does bring more chi to it, because that's your life force energy that you're offering with your attention.
Yeah. Wow. As you were saying that, it kind of struck me as I'm thinking about like the three poisons of Buddhism. It's like passion, aggression, ignorance, and how like ignorance is actually an action. And like this idea of like
Oh
intent,
yeah.
like you're like working, you're paying attention to it, but it's like the attention is one of inattention. It's
Yeah.
still investing it with that.
Well, yeah, because ignorance, it takes some work to ignore things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you may be so disconnected that you don't realize it, but it does take a toll on you. Like, I have an example of when I was in my late 20s. I remember I was really depressed, and I had all these, like, back when we had magazines. I had all these magazines piled up in my room, and I was like, I would lay on top of my bed, but purposely not look at all the magazines that were all piled up on the floor, because I was going to get to them one day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but even though I thought I was really ignoring them, I wasn't. And it was exhausting to have all that, because not only does it affect your path of travel through your bedroom, um, I would also purposely put all this attention to make sure that I wouldn't see them, right? So, like, I also give an example of, like, maybe there's like a treadmill that you have in your living
Yeah.
room that you purposely ignore every day, and you think you're not expending any energy ignoring it, but you are, because there's a part of your mind that purposely ignores that. So you are expending the chi, the energy, to purposely ignore things instead of just letting it go.
Yeah. Wow, I really like that kind of perspective. And I've had this conversation with a friend who studied this program called like the Avatar program. It's this very interesting thing, but one of the teachings from there is this notion of clearing up, I think it's called float. And it's essentially all the things that we know that we need to do. And it's just like we
Mm.
all have that like long list of like, yeah, I should clean out that, or I should do this. And we just ignore it. But if you start cleaning that up, it just frees energy in your mind so that you can actually apply that, and you feel lighter, you feel literally like less weight in your mind, so you can navigate the world with more flexibility and creativity that's otherwise being used up by all of this float that you have in there.
Absolutely. Like, I tend to do that a lot too, where I have all these things in my head that I think I should do, and and I know if I write them down, it's actually not that much, and then if I actually do them, it doesn't actually take that long. But once you keep it in your head, when you don't connect that heaven and earth aspect, right? You just keep it in your head, and it becomes much bigger than it really is on the practical side, like in the practical realm, like in the earth realm. It's actually not that much, but you can make it huge, just like a misunderstanding, right? Like, oh my God, Brett said that thing about me, and I could just, if I just talk to you about it, it's probably not even a big deal. But if
Yeah.
I just ruminate on it, it becomes like a huge issue, and then our mind creates so many perceptions. And so that's why like something like meditation practice is so important, right? Because we're studying the mind and we start to become more aware of these habitual patterns that we fall into, and we start to see things as they are.
Yeah.
And that's why I love feng shui too, because it's a little bit it's slightly more accessible, I think, than feng shui or than meditation sometimes, because people, can see outside of them. So they see, okay, maybe if I um, start to reduce, like if I could maybe declutter just that junk drawer, I could start to see how it's a much bigger thing than I thought it was, and it doesn't take me that long, or maybe I only need to spend 9 minutes on it and let it go. Or like, like another example is like having like a whole stack of books that you are supposed to read, that you want to read, but then you don't actually buy the book that you want to read right now because you have the whole stack of books that
Yeah.
you wanted to read last month, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
it
my life.
stifles us. Yeah, I know.
Yes.
I'm going through that right now too, but it
Yeah.
stifles us, right?
Yeah.
Because maybe we would just read that book that we want to read right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't want to pivot too much, but I do think it's a nice extension of what we're talking about in regards to chi.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also one of like those core elements of TCM and kind of a part of the palette that we're painting with when we talk about feng shui, and that is of the elements. And this is something we didn't talk about in our last conversation, and I've had like a vague understanding of it, but you're going through your books really was like, oh, those are important. So, could you just describe, I guess, the elements of this system and maybe how it correlates to chi?
Sure. So I like to look at it as like chi is the, oh God, I wrote this. Okay, like chi is like the seed, and it bursts open into yin and yang. So chi could maybe then open up into yin and yang, the duality or non-duality of yin and yang. And then it unfolds, it becomes a flower and it unfurls into the five elements, right? So you could even think of like a graph, like a tree graph, right? Like you have the chi on top, and then it divides out into yin and yang, and then that can further divide out into the five elements. And so in the Asian system, there's five elements, and many different cultures have four or five elements as well. And these will be slightly different than the Vedic system, and slightly different than the five Buddha families. But there's earth, wood, water, fire, and metal, and those are five elements. And even those can be further um, unfurl into yin and yang of each of those too. But it's a way of understanding our environment by looking to nature. So we start to see how in nature the system unfurls, and it's also, the five elements is also called the five phases. And so um, in Chinese medicine, they look at um, the five elements as well, for instance, and they may focus on different aspects, like different there's a different taste that corresponds to different like foods, right? There's different colors, which also like black. So water is black, but black rice or black berries are also water element in Chinese medicine, and also in feng shui. So feng shui, we focus on more of the visual aspects or the spatial aspects. So, for instance, water is the color black. Like I said, it's also wavy or undulating shapes, formless shapes, because water is formless. It's also a movement, like it's downward because water flows downward. And then water also has other qualities to it, like personality qualities that you can apply to people. Different, different. There's infinite ways that you could designate or define water, or any of the five elements. But really, it's a way of looking to our natural world in this, on Earth. We've inherited this planet. We're all humans living on this earth. So how can we look to the wisdom of nature and our natural world, and what can we understand about the elements that are contained within us, as well as the natural world. So, like, again, water, wood, earth, fire, and metal, and they're all in our bodies. They're in our environments. They're in our spaces, and they're in our personalities.
Yeah, amazing. So I guess how do they express themselves in our homes when we're working with feng shui and we're kind of like looking at how to best set up a room or the whole house? Do we want like a balance of all of the elements in each room, or do certain rooms require like certain emphasis on elements? Or I guess how do you treat them in the recipe of creating a nice space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like, for a newbie, the
Me.
easiest way, yeah. So for most people, and the easiest way, if you're thinking about, okay, starting to learn about these five elements, how do I like apply this? A really quick, easy takeaway to apply this is just to, yeah, look to see if you can have a balance of the five elements, or something that represents each of the five elements in a space. So if you want to talk about a really small space, like a bedroom or your desk, right? So can you identify any something of each of the five elements, and you can look at the color. So maybe you have something of each color, or the shape, or something else. Like, for instance, water can be the color black. It could be an undulating pattern or shape. It could also be water. It could be a glass of water. It could be a water fountain. It could be an image of water. So there's many different ways that you could start to invite each of those five elements into a space, and that's like kind of the easiest way. Like, one of my friends called it like that's Barnes and Noble feng shui. That's like the
Yeah,
easiest, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then for me, like, as a practitioner and a teacher, I would use it in a different way. I would probably look to, like, what does, like, Brett, like, what do you want to embrace more? What element do you want to bring more into your life, into your space? What do you want to cultivate? As well as, do I already see a predominance of a particular element that's exhibiting in your personality or in your life? So, for example, like, I could use you as an example. Like, is there something that, like, what is like one thing that you really want to work on?
I'd say creativity would probably be a surefire one. I'm sure a lot of
Okay.
people could relate to that too.
And creativity as in having more inspiration?
Yeah, or just the really it's just like time and commitment to expression, like what's already there, but just like actually sitting down and like doing the work.
Okay. So, because, like, so what I'm doing now is I'm kind of listening to what you're saying and seeing what element is most applicable to that. So, because creativity for the listeners could be a few different elements. Creativity, like, if it's wood element, means like, I don't feel creative. I need more spark, or I need more initiative to have creativity. Because wood element is like the energy for something to grow, new beginnings. It's like the seed pushing out of the ground, and or the first sprouts pushing out of the ground. So it's like this very active energy, and for things to begin. And then it could also be fire element, that, like, there's no passion, there's no fire lighting your creativity. So that's one thing, like, you really need that vitality to have creativity. But then you started to talk about how you actually needed to have more discipline, it sounds like, to begin to actually cultivate the creativity, because the creativity is there, the longing for creativity is there, the longing to create things. I think if you're telling me you need more discipline to actually to have that, you could, once you have the discipline, you have the wood element within you to do it. You have the fire element within you, but you may not have the discipline. So that's metal element. So metal element is really about precision and getting things done and efficiency, and also, like, yeah, movement, right? Getting things done. So it could be also, see, it's not like that. It's not, it's a yes and, right? We talked about
Yeah,
yes
yeah,
and. So it's yes
yeah.
and. So, but I think for you, what I'm picking up is that you could do with more metal elements. So I would say like, so is this creativity in terms of personal or creativity more disciplining creativity for your work life, or what do you think?
Probably a little bit of both, honestly.
Okay.
Like I feel like that would apply to just kind of like things that I'd like to do is more like hobbies, getting more into like the dance that I want to do and stuff like that, and writing. But then also, the creativity of where to take my massage practice, and like there's just so many ways I could go, and like what do I do next? How do I fit that in?
Uh,
And so it's kind of both.
so are you having a hard time getting things started?
Yeah, I would say just like building it in my routine. Like I'm a very routine person, and it's just like I have everything that
Ah.
I've been doing, and it's like, oh, this is all really good. I don't, there's not that much, you know, longing. I feel like pretty accomplished, but
Mhm.
it's just like, oh, there's still these other things that would be nice to do.
Yeah, so it could, so also I would also look at people's, maybe their elemental makeup based on their birth date. I don't know if you're open to sharing your birth year.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Okay.
1993.
Okay. Are you born in January or February?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to do a quick numerology. So 9 plus 3 is, oh, I'm not going to say out loud what I'm doing. I'm going to just because I'm doing it, I'm cheating the way I'm doing it because I teach it in a more, the way I'm doing it only applies for people born in the before 2000, because
Oh,
the
yeah.
cheat doesn't work with
Yeah.
2000. So let me just do a quick calculation. Hold on. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're 7. So that you're very metal. Okay, so your numerology, it's called the 9-star key. You're very metal, but you're like shiny metal. So it makes sense that you're a podcast host because
Okay.
you're really good at talking. It's because metal element is related to the mouth and communication. So you're good at talking. Your The shiny jewelry aspect is that you're also really good at connecting with people and you enjoy having a good time. You're good at celebrating. You like to play. And my business partner would describe a 7 metal as also a little bit like the hostess on the Titanic. Like you're like, everything is totally
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Everything is great, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're really good at that. Like very like beautiful, like into beauty, shiny. Where like I'm also metal, but you're yin metal, I'm yang metal. So I'm like a sword or like iron ore. I'm like rough, unrefined metal, but you're very refined. And so I think maybe metal isn't what you need. So you could
Oh,
probably I think it may be actually the other two things I talked about then, like maybe a little bit more fire, because fire actually melts metal, but it lets you become more refined and more bendable. So it's a little bit painful, right? When you
yeah.
put metal into a fire, but it further refine, like it's going to be able to reshape you, and it gives you that inspiration, and it gives you that warmth and that heart longing.
Yeah.
And then also wood element is also a little bit challenging for metal, but I think you can handle it because you can imagine an axe. Well, you're more like of a little butter knife, right? I'm like the axe, and you're like
Yeah.
the little butter. You're like the nice little butter knife, but like it takes a long time to like saw through like a tree, right?
Yeah.
The bough of a tree. So also over time that dulls you too. So and then also like as soon as you chop down the tree, the limbs start growing back, right? So it's a continual thing. But I think that the wood element would also inspire you to actually get things started. It's going to help you to like get things moving and get things to grow. So that could be brought into your space. So the wood element could be brought into your space with a few different ways. So you could bring in the colors, which are green, teal, or blue, or you could bring in a living green plant. Those
Hmm.
are some of the simple ways. And then the fire element can be brought in with the color red. So you can actually put your like plant in a red pot, or you can also add red, but it doesn't have to be like a whole wall of red. It could be something really small, like it could be a red mug. Like maybe you have a green coaster on a red mug, and you put the attention. If we both go back to our attention conversation, you set the intention and you place your attention on, like, I'm bringing this red in to inspire more creativity, more passion, more longing, to inspire me to get things started, to get things moving, to grow something new. And this green or this teal will inspire it. Or, I mean, I personally love the plant idea, because I've had so many students tell me that like they put a plant in a certain area and they see it grow, and they really can relate it to the story of things like beginning to sprout or cultivate, like whether it's a partnership or harmony with their family, or their creativity. Like, or I've even had a student like she put a plant in her fame area, but then she was getting too much fame. She's like, she said, my ex boss is trying to sue me. He sent me a cease and desist.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Too much notoriety.
Too much, right? Too much
Yeah,
visibility.
yeah.
So then she's like, I gotta tone it down. But
Yeah.
but you can start to really see, like, because the plant will respond to you, because the plant is living.
Yeah. So it's really interesting that you're bringing up plants. I'm in the way. I actually have this really big, I don't know what it is. I got it in an estate sale, and it's just, I can't get it to stop growing.
Uh-huh.
And it's been in this corner of the room, but I recently had a small like cabbage tree,
Okay.
and I repotted it, and then it just died. It was like this really big tree, and it was within like a month, and it just started dying. So I'm still trying to nurse it back to life. I have like a little bit of a clipping from it. But then I got an elephant ear tree, and I put it in the same spot as the cabbage tree.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm losing like the second big leaf on it. So I'm like, I don't know.
Where do you know which Bagua areas it is in?
Uh, well, okay. So here's the thing. I was looking at the Bagua stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and we can maybe get into that for the listeners as well. But I have two doors to my room.
Okay.
So I didn't know what one would be the one to consider like the main
Are they
room,
on the same
or the main.
wall?
No, they're right here, and they're like kitty corner. So it's like one here and then like one here.
Okay. Is there a primary door?
Yeah, I guess I would say it's this one that's directly
Okay.
over
You would use
here.
the primary door.
Okay, yeah, all right. Um,
So what Bagua was the cabbage plants
so
in?
that would be, hold on, let me get my
Okay, when
trusty
you're
manual
standing in the
here.
door looking in.
Yep, let's see. So I guess it would probably be reflection.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's completion. That's the area of completion. Um, Maybe it's indicating that, well, it's the area that's related to letting things go. It's like things beginning to die away.
Oh, interesting. Well, all the plants are letting go. So I moved the plant. I was like, maybe it's the window, maybe it's the light. Um,
Yeah.
but a lot of things just happened there. So I feel like maybe breaking down what we just did with the bagua and the placements might
Hmm.
be a good thing, because that seems to me like one of the major tools of feng shui is like utilizing this floor plan overlay. So could you just talk a little bit about what the bagua is and what we just explored there?
Sure. Yeah. Because people are like, what's going on? I want to know, but I don't
Yeah,
understand.
yeah, yeah,
Okay. But Brett read the whole book, so he understands.
yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
had to hone that in.
No, I know, because I think I think I hate to talk about things when people don't understand what we're talking about. So
Hmm.
I always think it's very important to explain, to not
Yeah,
exclude people.
yeah.
So for the listeners, in feng shui, there's many different tools. Like we talked about the five elements. There's lots of other tools to use, and one of the most popular ones is called the bagua. So the bagua basically means 8 areas or 8 directions or 8 images. And so what it's pointing to is this mandala that we use in feng shui. And this mandala is called the bagua, and it means 8 areas. So that means there's a center, which is sometimes also referred to as the ninth area, but there's a center and it radiates out into 8 different directions. And those directions can be related, can relate to different life aspects. And in the school that I practice, we primarily lay the bagua and we move it according to the flow of qi, which we talked about. So we generally overlay this mandala based on the primary entrance to the room or to the space, the entire space. And it goes over these different 8 life areas and the center, and it can give you information about different aspects of your life. So we've already talked about the 5 elements. So each of these areas, we call them guas. Each of these areas have a different elemental association, a different direction, a different description, has a different yin-yang aspect, has a different color, shape, and so forth. They also relate to the seasons. Also, the elements relate to the seasons as well. Like, so we're in the fall, right? So the fall is related to metal as well. So there's many different layers, and they can be laid on your home. So what we just did was I asked Brett. Brett was indicating to me 2 unusual things are happening to the plants in his home, in his room, and so then I was curious. So this is what I usually do. I'm curious about what is happening in someone's life, what someone wants to work on. And I look and see if there's anything that I can read in their floor plan. And the bagua is one of the tools that I use to read it. So I may look at the bagua based on something that happened in the space, something that stands out in the space, something that's unusual in the space. Or maybe I look at it based on what the person's asking me for support in. But in this case, we noticed something unusual happening in one area of Brett's home or Brett's room. So I wanted to know what bagua area. So so he actually had 2 doors to his bedroom. So I directed him to use the primary door, because usually there's a primary door, even though there's possibly 2 doors. And then we would lay the bagua by basically standing in the doorway of the room looking in, and then you could divide that room. Like, everyone can do this right now. You could visualize or go stand in the doorway to your bedroom, look into the bedroom, divide it into a tic-tac-toe, like a 3x3 grid. The far left corner is the wealth area. The far right corner is the relationship area. Those are 2 of the 9 areas, or the 8. I'm counting the center as an area too. And those are the ones that the most popular. But in the case of Brett's, we're talking about an area that's related to completion, that he has 2 plants that are letting go and completing their life cycle. But Brett was also able to save a seed of that, a cutting, to be able to maybe grow something new, which I think is very appropriate for this season. Because just like if we look outside in most of the northern hemisphere now, depending on where you live, the trees are starting to drop their leaves. So now is naturally a time when humans, in the autumn, we, just like the trees are letting go of their leaves, we naturally want to start to let go of things too. So maybe however these trees supported you, it was time for them to let go. You couldn't stop it, right? But
I
you
keep
did.
telling myself that.
Yeah, you did the best you could.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you still have. But there's, just like with humans, though, we can't stop death, but we can. But you did keep a seed of something that you could provide new growth. So similarly, we can think about, like, what is it we want to let go of right now for the autumn? It's appropriate for the season. It's appropriate energetically, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater too. We could still compost or use a seed of that, or what was helpful in our new projects and things that are beginning again.
Mm-hmm. So, as we're doing the work with the bagua, and maybe a listener just went to the door frame and looked in with it and kind of examined their room, how do we, say we have like an intention or something that we really want to work on, what can we do to, say if it's like the inspiration, and they're recognizing that it's like empty, there's not much going on there. How can they kind of infuse more chi into that? And like, how does that look as a practice?
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to maybe work on their we'll use the inspiration area. So we gave the Bagua areas names, but they're not limited to those names that we gave. And one of them is called inspiration. So if the listener would stand in their door of their bedroom looking in, we talked about the far left corner, the far right corner, but the middle of that far wall, that far area, is related to inspiration. We call it inspiration in the book. In Chinese, it's called Li. It's related to the fire element, and it's in most Bagua Feng Shui terminology, it's also referred to as your fame and reputation area. So it might be related to like how visible you are. So for instance, if you're single, maybe you're not meeting anyone because nobody knows that you're single, or or you never go out. You're never meeting new people. Or maybe you're unhappy at work and you keep getting passed up for promotions and you're not being recognized for the good work that you do. You're not getting any visibility, or you have your own business, you're an entrepreneur, and you're not you're good at what you're offering, but no one's buying your services because they don't know your services are available, or you're not well known enough, you're not getting enough visibility. Or sometimes you have too much visibility, like that student I talked about, and like maybe people are like starting to slander you, or maybe they're talking behind your back, or or they're gossiping about you. So there can be two ends to that, right? And so you can look. So if that's something you want to work on, you could look to that area of the Bagua, so that area of your bedroom, and you can either add something. Well, first is what Brett mentioned. Notice what's happening in there. So maybe that's where you have that armchair that you just throw all your crap on all the time, and you don't remember the last time you cleared it off. Or maybe in that area you have that treadmill that you hope to use one day but you never use. Or maybe it's like a really lovely area. You have a like shrine or altar to your ancestors. Who knows, right? So just notice. Every person's going to have a different answer. Be curious about what's happening in that area. And then to come back to our attention topic, you can bring some attention to that area, whether it means decluttering that area, cleaning up that area, sitting and meditating in that area, seeing how you feel in that area. Or if it's perfect, you love that area, maybe just giving it recognizing that it's different for everyone. So give it attention, notice what's happening. And then either you can also add something to that area that may enhance what you want to create, or you can take something away from that area. But most people, it's easier to add something. So if we go back to that plant, you could put a plant in that area and that also works elementally because that's a fire area, and a plant is wood. So a wood element feeds fire. So wood element, like if you think about wood, actually fuels the fire. So you put more logs into the fire and that fuels it. So you could put a very like maybe a little plant there, or you could put a big plant there to really to feed the fire for more fire element. But if you have maybe too much visibility, then maybe you want to see, maybe you realize, wow, I have like a lot of plants in that area. Maybe it's time to take it away from that area. And it also depends too. Like some people are like, well, I already have a plant. Can I just put it in that area? And I say, well, do you want more of the same energy you already have? Or maybe you want to get some chi, some energy from some fresh chi. So maybe you get a cutting from a friend and you cultivate it. Or are you putting a dying plant in that area that you have to spend a lot of energy to heal, right? Like have curiosity. Like what are you putting in that area and why? But you can also keep it really simple. And maybe also just put like a crystal, like a red crystal. That's the color of that area. So you can put the color of that gua in that area with the intention that you want to bring more energy. So it doesn't have to be super complicated. So you could just be like, okay, that area of the bagua that I want to enhance, maybe I want to enhance, like the love area, right? The relationship area is pink. So maybe in that relationship corner, the far right, you put something pink or a pair of pink things to represent you and your partner, or you and your future partner. And just keep it really simple and say, I'm putting something pink here to enhance more love, more understanding, and more compassion with my relationship, or to open up my heart to invite in a partner.
Wow, I love that. It's so intuitive, and I feel like there's like an unlimited amount of combinations that you could kind of be working with based on the circumstances of your life. Kind of utilizing some of these principles, something I thought would be interesting to explore. We had mentioned that it's important to kind of have like a sensitivity to the things in your life, have the awareness and the attention. And for me, one of the things that has really helped me cultivate a sense of awareness is, as we are, the way that we know each other is through like mindfulness. So I'm kind of curious about how we could structure a space in which to practice something like a sitting meditation. Is there like a certain part of the Bagua, or does that kind of change depending on where you're at and relating with it? Or how would you set up a meditative space knowing what you know?
That's a great question. So generally, people are very limited as to maybe where they can set up their meditation space. So I think that's always important to recognize. So generally, I don't recommend like a particular Bagua area better than another one, because when we lay the Bagua, the mandala, over our house or our room, there's a lot of constraints. So maybe there's a bathroom in a particular area, but you could say that any area of the Bagua might be there. We could find a way to connect, like what our intention is for mindfulness. But there is an area of the Bhagavad that relates to knowledge and self-cultivation. So traditionally, that might be a good area to put it in. So that's called forgot what we called it in the book, but it's the dark blue area. I'll
Mm-hmm.
just look at it right now. Okay, it's called insight. But
Yep.
but there's definitely lots of different, any area of the Bhagavad could be good. Just like I think you could meditate anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So but I think that there is another feng shui principle that is helpful in setting up your meditation space. So I think the most important thing is to set up your meditation space where you're actually going to meditate, where you think you're going to
Yeah.
meditate, right? Because that's the biggest obstacle, you and I know, right? The biggest obstacle to meditation is actually taking your seat to sitting down and meditating. So you want to, I think the most important thing is to actually carve out a space, and it could be a temporary space. It could be the edge of your bed. So in that case, you could sit on the bagua you could set the bagua on your bed, and the bottom left corner would be the inside area of your bed, or you could sit in the middle of your bed too. So, but that you could carve out a space on the edge of your bed, that corner of your bed, or the most important thing is to find a place that will work for you. And then the feng shui principle that's important, I think, is to set up to set yourself in the commanding position. So basically, that you can see the door without directly being in line with the door, so that you can have a lot more ease, and your fight or flight, your fight or flight is kind of settled down, and that you are in a place of safety when you're meditating. Because I realized for many years I was sitting meditating with my back to the door, and I always felt a little bit anxious. And so I set up a mirror so I could see behind me, but then I eventually changed, because that's a correction. So if you can't set yourself up so you could see the door, but most of the time I think you can, because you're just turning your cushion around, you could set up a mirror so you could see the door. Or you could just simply turn around so you can see the door, so that when you feel a sense of safety, that you're not in a fight or flight response when you're meditating, because it already can be very triggering to sit down and meditate for a long time, right? For some people, for a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people. So, so setting yourself up so you could see the door without directly being in line with the door. And then you could also do those things that we talked about earlier, like you could bring in something, each of the five elements, on your altar space or your shrine space, as a reminder to connect with the five elements, or place one of each with the intention that you are seeking to balance all those, to harmonize all those different energies.
Wow, amazing. Well, so I'm noticing we are kind of coming up to time. There's just so much there,
I know.
and like it's like we feel we really just like opened up a box at like the end of the thing there. But
Well,
maybe
that's
that's a
why I teach a 6-month program.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot to talk about.
Yeah, yeah, and that might be a really good thing to leave people on is just like a little bit of a cliffhanger so that they can kind of feel some inspiration to start engaging with you more thoroughly. And I would say that the book is a really great place to start. So, I do want to give you a chance to kind of just share how people can stay in contact with you and how you work with people.
Sure. So I have a podcast as well, since all you all are podcast listeners. So my podcast is called the Holistic Spaces Podcast, and it's just about feng shui. And we also have this book that just came out, Mindful Living. It's available wherever books are sold. And I also have another book that came out last year called Mindful Homes. And the best way to work with me is I do one-on-one consultations, but but my favorite way to work with people, which is a big commitment, is our 6-month certification program, and we only accept 27 people a year into that program. But it's a practitioner's training program, but also, most people don't want that. So the best way to learn from me is probably to buy the book. That's accessible for everyone, and that's why we wrote the book, so we could reach and help and support and offer our teachings to the largest group of people we could. And then I also offer one-on-one consultations on, I guess you could go to angiecho.com, and then there's under service my feng shui services.
Mm. And I will say, having read the book, it really has left me with a sense of inspiration and like I kind of want to just like experiment using some of these principles. So there's something that feels really open-ended about it, and the way you equip the readers with just this set of tools that just feels really that you can create your own personal relationship to everything. And, it really doesn't feel like there's necessarily like a wrong way, which I think is really accessible for people who are just starting a practice. And it's got me excited to start working with it. So I can vouch.
Good. Well, I really take the Buddhist perspective on how I teach feng shui, and I think it's so important. Just like in Buddhism, the way that I teach feng shui is don't take my word for it. Like, please practice it, try it out, and take with you what's helpful and let go of what isn't. And there is no right way. Your experience is the most important. There are guidelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are guidelines. It's a lineage-based practice, and it comes from Asia, and there are certain guidelines and foundational information. But really, at the end of the day, you're the one who's doing this. So it should help you, and it should support you and provide some insight and support for you. So however you practice it is the most important. I'm just transmitting it to you.
Yeah, I love that. What does David Nichtern say? I think it's like principles, not rules.
Yeah.
Kind of the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But I apply all those teachings that I've learned from David and from my other Buddhist teachers to feng shui. I really don't see them as separate practices at all.
Yeah. We could have gotten into like the Drala teachings and stuff too, which is something I'm always perennially interested in, but alas,
we could talk for hours, Brett.
Yeah. It could just keep going and going. So thank you so much, Angie, for giving me some of your time and just sharing these teachings with the West. And it really is just so cool and so interesting and I think really helpful. So thank you so much for joining me on the show.
You're welcome. And I can't wait to hear about your creative projects.
Yeah.
And I want to see how your plant does, your cabbage cutting.
Yeah. I'll keep you in the loop.
Okay.
We're on the gram. So, all right. Well, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
All right, everybody. That was the episode. Thank you so much for listening all the way through until the end. That was Anjie Cho. You got all of our links there. They're also down in the description. If you want to support this show, head on over to patreon.com/21st Century Vitalism and consider becoming a patron. It's a huge help to the show, and I appreciate it. You can also subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, like on Facebook. We're all existing in the digital age, so you know the whole wrap. All right, we will catch you for the next episode. Bye.